In December of 2020, it was revealed that a software company called SolarWinds had been breached by a group of hackers believed to be controlled by the Russian government. While companies get hacked all the time, this breach was far more serious than anything that had happened before. This is because it was a so-called supply chain attack. The hackers weren't interested in SolarWinds in and of itself. Rather, they used SolarWinds to create backdoors into its customers. SolarWinds had a near monopoly in its niche with over 275,000 customers, including 425 of the Fortune 500 companies, and hundreds of government agencies around the world. By hacking into SolarWinds, the Russian intelligence services were able to plant backdoors into all of SolarWinds' customers, allowing them to download some of the most sensitive data from thousands of the world's most important corporations and government entities. In the aftermath of the attack, SolarWinds tried to defend themselves by emphasizing the sophisticated nature of the hackers. Being a relatively small company as they were, they didn't have the resources to defend against a well-planned attack from an adversarial nation-state. But recent revelations paint a different picture. In October of 2023, the Securities and Exchange Commission filed charges against SolarWinds and its Chief Information Security Officer Timothy Brown, who held that position before the hack and retains his position to this day. According to the complaint, SolarWinds' senior management team knew about the egregious cybersecurity vulnerabilities for years before the attack. Not only did they fail to remedy these vulnerabilities, they actively deceived their customers and investors about these risks. In this video, we'll tell the story of how years of incompetence created the conditions for the largest cyber attack in US history. SolarWinds is an enterprise software company. Their main product, Orion, helps IT professionals monitor their internal servers and other IT infrastructure. For example, a large corporation may operate dozens or even hundreds of servers. Orion allows an IT professional to monitor whether or not these servers are all functioning properly. If some of the servers are overutilized, they can route workloads to underutilized servers and vice versa, which increases efficiency and allows for faster computing across the organization. For Orion to work, the customer must indirectly give SolarWinds access to all of its servers. This requires customers to have a high degree of trust between SolarWinds and its customers. Customers must be confident that SolarWinds will safeguard access to their servers and take prudent measures to prevent cyber attacks. To reassure their customers, SolarWinds published a lengthy security statement on their website, which outlined the company's cybersecurity measures. Specifically, they claimed that all of their products are developed based on a secure development lifecycle. The secure development lifecycle follows standard security practices, including vulnerability testing, regression testing, penetration testing, and product security assessments. They also claim to enforce a rigorous password policy. Internal passwords were to be changed every 90 days, have a minimum length of 8 characters, and include 3 of the 4 following characteristics: uppercase letter, lowercase letter, a number, and a non-alphanumeric character. All their databases of passwords would be encrypted, so even if a hacker was able to access the raw data in the database, they shouldn't be able to read the passwords. Over the years, SolarWinds established Orion as the leading network management software. By 2020, they bragged that they had 275,000 customers, including 425 of the US Fortune 500, all 5 branches of the US military, numerous government agencies, and all of the top 5 US accounting firms. It's not uncommon for companies to brag about their high-profile customers. This is a great way to burnish your image and gain credibility. But this impressive customer list was also noticed by the Kremlin for all the wrong reasons. Most major governments, including Russia, China, Iran, and probably even the United States, employ thousands of hackers whose sole goal is to breach their adversaries' government servers in an attempt to gain a geopolitical advantage. For Russia, the biggest prize would be to hack into the US military and other government agencies. Of course, the US government knows this, so they enforce strict cybersecurity measures, conduct extensive background checks on government employees, and only allow employees to use secure government-owned computers. This makes it extremely difficult to hack a government agency directly. When the front door is too strong, you start looking for side windows, and SolarWinds was the perfect side window. They bragged that all branches of the US military and numerous government agencies use their software. Thus, compromising SolarWinds would be a veritable goldmine for Russia's intelligence agencies. Remember that SolarWinds prided itself on its commitment to cybersecurity, as outlined by their security statement. This perception of SolarWinds as a safe cyber counterparty was a key selling point for potential customers. As early as 2018, some SolarWinds employees took note that for many of their products, they did not implement the cybersecurity protocols that they advertised in their security statement. In an internal email dated January 2018, a SolarWinds employee said, quote, "I've gotten feedback that we don't do some of the things that are indicated in the security statement's secure development lifecycle section. There is improvement needed to be able to meet the security expectations of a secure development lifecycle. We will be working with teams throughout 2018 to begin incorporating the SDL into their development lifecycle, unquote. SolarWinds knew that they were not in compliance with their own security statement, which they advertised to their customers. Their original plan was to work hard throughout 2018 to come into compliance. Of course, this didn't happen, and the reason for this is simple: greed. Developing and maintaining software, especially software as complicated as what SolarWinds made, is a difficult and labor-intensive process. Making software that is robust to cyberattacks is even harder. Software engineers are expensive, and SolarWinds only had a limited number of them. They wanted the majority of their programmers to focus on developing and launching new products, as that's the driver of revenue growth. They don't want to divert resources to cybersecurity, as that doesn't directly generate revenue. They only had a skeleton team dedicated to cybersecurity, and this team was completely overwhelmed. They were identifying huge numbers of vulnerabilities, but didn't have time to fix them all, so the number of known vulnerabilities just kept piling up. One of these overwhelmed employees emailed his colleague saying, quote, "We filed more vulnerabilities than we fixed, and by fix, it often means just a temporary fix, but the problem is still there, and it's huge. I have no idea what we can do about it. Even if we started to hire like crazy, which we most likely will not, it will still take years. Can't really figure out how to un-F this situation. Not good," unquote. Hiring more cybersecurity employees would cost money, which would mean lower profits. This was something that SolarWinds' senior management team wasn't willing to accept. Perhaps the most outrageous example of SolarWinds' cybersecurity incompetence was uncovered by an independent cybersecurity researcher in 2019. India-based cybersecurity researcher Vinith Kumar stumbled across a publicly available GitHub repository posted by a SolarWinds intern. This code contained the password to one of the company's servers, which was SolarWinds 123. As it turns out, many of the passwords throughout the organization were not strong. For example, the default passwords for many of their products was the word password. Many of their passwords were stored in unencrypted plain text files. It is not believed that the hackers used this specific GitHub repository to infiltrate SolarWinds, but it shows the lack of internal controls at the company, whereby an intern was in charge of setting the password to one of their servers. He was apparently not told that he shouldn't be putting all the code on GitHub for the world to see. Hackers would eventually exploit a much more fundamental and systemic vulnerability. Many of SolarWinds' employees worked from home. They were not required to use company computers. They could work using their own computers and cell phones to access SolarWinds' virtual private network, or VPN. On SolarWinds company computers, they had data loss prevention software. This notifies administrators when someone downloads sensitive files, makes changes to various security settings, or uploads code to SolarWinds servers. This software has to be installed on their computer. So for remote employees using their own computers, whatever the employee does is basically untraceable. In 2018, a SolarWinds employee notified his superiors about this vulnerability. In an internal email, he complained that when accessing the SolarWinds VPN, an employee can basically do whatever they want without us detecting it until it's too late. Despite this warning, Timothy Brown and the SolarWinds information security team did nothing to fix this vulnerability. They presumably decided that fixing this problem would be too complicated and costly. They'd just take their chances and hope for the best. In or around January of 2019, a group of hackers, now believed to be connected to the Russian intelligence services, were able to obtain credentials to log into SolarWinds VPN remotely. It is not known how they obtained these credentials. They may have stolen it from a SolarWinds employee via a phishing attack. But given SolarWinds' failure to enforce its password strength policy, it's also possible that they just guessed the password. Because of the vulnerabilities discussed previously, SolarWinds administrators had no way of knowing that an unauthorized actor had gained access to their corporate VPN. Due to SolarWinds' liberal use of admin permissions, the credentials stolen by the hackers were for an admin account. They were thus able to access privileged databases with customer information and disable antivirus software from the inside. The hacker downloaded 7 million internal SolarWinds emails, which contained a treasure trove of information about cybersecurity vulnerabilities across the organization. Once inside the company VPN, the hackers were able to access SolarWinds' software development environment and insert malicious code into the update packages for the Orion platform. These updates were installed by customers between March and June of 2020. Remember that to use the Orion platform, the customer must give it access to the various servers that it will manage. Thus, Orion had access to just about all the data across their customers' servers. In total, 18,000 customers installed updates with the malware included. While the hackers technically had access to 18,000 companies, they only infiltrated the servers of an estimated 40 to 50 organizations. Whenever they enter an Orion customer servers and start downloading data, there's a chance that they will be detected by that organization's own cybersecurity protocols. Given the risk, it's only worthwhile for the hackers to steal data from a select number of high-value targets. These targets include the US Departments of Treasury, Homeland Security, State, and Defense. The private sector corporations impacted were primarily technology companies, including Microsoft, Intel, Cisco, VMware, and the cybersecurity firm FireEye. The choice of targets is quite interesting. The hackers focus on technology and cybersecurity companies. Remember that once they start breaching the customer's servers, they risk being exposed. Obviously, the riskiest company to breach is a cybersecurity company, as they are the most capable of detecting the penetration. To take this risk, the reward must have been commensurately high. The hackers were playing the long game. They specifically wanted to infiltrate cybersecurity companies so they could figure out vulnerabilities in existing cybersecurity methods. This will allow them to perform even more successful hacks going forward. In May of 2020, an unidentified US government agency which used the Orion software noticed that it was making unusual attempts to contact unknown websites. It appeared that the Orion software had been compromised. The government agency contacted SolarWinds asking them to investigate. SolarWinds' security team indeed found evidence that a hacker had likely had access to the Orion platform since at least mid-2019. But due to their understaffing and poor detection measures, they were unable to identify the source of the breach. As Chief Information Security Officer, Timothy Brown was aware of this breach and realized that there was a huge number of vulnerabilities across the platform. Given the understaffing of the security team, it would likely take them years to identify the root cause of the breach and fix all the associated vulnerabilities. They never disclosed these issues to their investors or customers. All the while, Brown was busy dumping his personal holdings of SolarWinds stock. After he was made aware of the breach at the US government agency, he sold well over $100,000 worth of SolarWinds shares. In October of 2020, an unidentified cybersecurity firm, which was also a customer, contacted SolarWinds, saying that they had been the victim of a cyber attack seemingly related to the Orion platform. The details of the breach were extremely similar to the breach of the US government agency in May. Thus, at this point, the Orion platform had undoubtedly been compromised. The hackers were able to use this as a backdoor into multiple of their customers. SolarWinds told the second victim that there had been no previous issues with the Orion platform. This was a blatant lie. Telling the truth about the compromise would risk causing their customers to lose confidence and cancel their subscriptions, so they decided that they were better off covering it up and hoping the breach goes undetected. The charade finally came to an end in December of 2020, when the hackers used the Orion backdoor to infiltrate a cybersecurity company called FireEye. In early December, FireEye's IT team received a request from an employee to register a second cell phone for two-factor authentication. Out of an abundance of caution, the IT team called the employee, asking if he indeed was trying to register a second phone. The employee had no idea what they were talking about. He didn't even have a second cell phone. At this point, FireEye knew that they had been breached. A hacker had somehow stolen that employee's credentials and was trying to register their own phone to do two-factor authentication. Being a cybersecurity company, FireEye had the tools to find the root cause of the breach. The hacker was highly sophisticated and hid their tracks well. According to FireEye's CEO, they had to manually look through over 50,000 lines of code across all of their servers and software before finally identifying the malicious backdoor. Sure enough, they found that the malware was hiding in an update to the Orion platform, which they had installed a few months prior. They named the attack Sunburst and went public with their findings on December 13th. At this point, SolarWinds was no longer able to cover up the breach. They had to admit that thousands of their customers, including dozens of US government agencies, were likely affected. One of the most shocking things about the SolarWinds affair is despite the extreme incompetence that allowed the breach to occur, none of the senior management team has been fired. To be fair, the CEO, Sudhakar Ramakrishna, was hired on December 9th, just days before the cyber attack was exposed. The previous CEO stepped down for reasons unrelated to cybersecurity. But it's a different story for Chief Information Security Officer Timothy Brown. He knew of the company's vulnerabilities since at least 2018, lied to SolarWinds customers about their cybersecurity practices, and actively tried to cover up the breach even after the evidence became irrefutable in October of 2020. He is currently defending himself against a fraud lawsuit brought by the SEC for these exact reasons. He had one job for which he failed completely and in the most egregious way, yet to this day he retains his position. While the Sunburst breach exposes the vulnerability of cyberattacks in our increasingly digitized world, there is one silver lining. No matter how sophisticated a hacking group is, they don't have superpowers. The only reason they were able to hack SolarWinds is because of vulnerabilities that SolarWinds' senior management team knew about but failed to fix for years. From a technical perspective, the tools to defend against such cyber attacks already exist. The real problem is that many corporations underinvest in cybersecurity in an effort to cut costs and boost short-term profits, ultimately at the expense of national security. Until corporate executives are held accountable for their failures, this is unlikely to change. Alright guys, that wraps it up for this video. What do you think about SolarWinds? Why do you think they didn't fire Timothy Brown after his failings were exposed? Let us know in the comments section below. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, so we can bring you the most important stories in the worlds of business, economics, and technology. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Wall Street Millennial, signing out.